Hello and welcome to the MISFORMAMA podcast. I'm your host, Abbie Halberstadt, happy wife, mama to 10, Bible-believing Christian, and we're going to jump right into part 2 of our episode about solo parenting when dad is gone in just a second, but I want to introduce you to a brand new podcast sponsor, Yeah Baby Goods. And I have a fun fact for you. The IKEA Antelope high chair, $20, is the world's best-selling high chair. And Yeah Baby Goods was started by a mama who wanted to make the best-selling high chair even better and safer with add-ons like cushions, leg wraps, footrests, and FDA food-grade silicone placemats. And she wanted to do all of this without breaking the bank. Yeah Baby Goods also makes stylish and safe silicone food-grade dinnerware for kids. I have some of it, and my twin bees have now completely ignored everything else in the drawer because they always only pick the ones from Yeah Baby Goods, which is fantastic, except that I need to get some more because we're not using any of the rest of it anymore. But my favorite product is their restaurant bag, which is basically a little zip-up pouch with a cute pattern on it that comes with a silicone food mat as well as food scissors. So easy to take to a restaurant, makes a fantastic gift. You can use the code MISFORMAMA, MISFORMAMA, at yeahbabygoods.com. I'll put all of that in the show notes for 20% off your order. So last week we were talking about what it's like to solo parent if you have a husband that works shift work or is deployed or, like mine does, travels fairly regularly throughout the year. Just kind of how you adjust your expectations, how you adjust your schedules, how you adjust your rhythms to thrive instead of merely survive. And so if you want to get the first round of that, we chatted about that last week, and we're going to finish up the topic today. I had a couple of people respond to various things in that podcast that I'll include here. And actually, one wasn't a response to the podcast particularly, I don't think. I think it was in response to a What Do You Want to Know Wednesday question, which if you are mostly a podcast follower rather than a social media follower, but you want to get some specific questions answered or see a bunch of answers to FAQs, a lot of which end up in longer form here on the podcast, but some of which don't. Some are just fun, some are more serious, and some are very practical and helpful. I do that on Wednesdays over on my Instagram account at m.is.for.mama. But I think it was in response to my saying that I was grateful that Sean didn't travel for long periods. And I said, usually it's no more than 6 days. And someone said, quite a few someone's in my DMs said, oh, wow, 6 days is a lot. I'm such a baby. I'm such a wimp. I can only handle 2 or 3 days, or even when my husband's gone for 24 hours, I really feel like I'm kind of going crazy. And we addressed this to some extent in the first part of this series. And I talked about the idea that one person's mountain will be another person's molehill, but that we shouldn't be belittling others for their circumstances, even if they don't match up with ours. And I got a really cool message from an Army wife who said that this wasn't the cool part, but she said that she feels like in the Army culture, or the Army family culture, and specifically the Army wife culture, there's a lot of reliance on self and a lot of taking identity in being an Army wife and being tough and being resilient and being a lot of the things that we talked about last week: flexible, able to roll with the punches, able to adjust and adapt. And while all of those are good things, if they become where we kind of find our identity, where we are putting our hope, or the things that we're becoming prideful in, it can make us very lacking in compassion towards those who don't have the same circumstances, levels of endurance or perseverance. So she was saying she enjoyed part 1 of this topic because it was something that really aligned with, one, how she's had to learn to adjust as her husband is deployed. And she said sometimes, you'll hear people say, oh, 6 months, honey, just you wait till it's a year. You haven't seen anything yet. And we've talked about this before on other podcasts, but this idea that just you wait, or you haven't even done anything hard yet, is really not very helpful in any aspect of life, whether it's in mothering, when someone says just you wait until they're teenagers, or just you wait until he's a toddler or a preteen, or whatever stage they feel like you should dread the most. It's not helpful in wifing either, in comparing our circumstances to someone else's and saying, Just you wait until you actually have it. Basically, that we're not really benefiting ourselves, even though it sometimes feels like we're building ourselves up, and we're certainly not benefiting anybody else by trying to issue this dire prediction of doom and gloom over their lives, over any particular aspect of their lives. And so this mom was saying, thank you for pointing out that yes, we adapt. Yes, we step up to the plate. Yes, we answer that high and holy calling of not hiding in the closet eating Oreos, even though that's what we really want to do. But also acknowledging not everybody's going to have the same level of hard, and that's okay. And we're not to mock and ridicule others, but instead to build each other up. And then I also got a couple of people that wanted to hear how I respond when my husband comes home. They said, I'd really love to hear about that transition from when you are the one that's making the decisions for everything. You're running the schedule. You're adjusting I talked about adjusting our meal plans, even for when Sean isn't here, and streamlining things or making things even simpler. It's not like we typically eat complicated meals anyway, but just that I might simplify it down to a bunch of cut up veggies and fruit and some eggs and toast. And while that happens with Sean's home too, it happens less. And so they said, how do you make that shift? So I'll start there. I think that the thing you have to remind yourself is that you are not taking, quote, the wheel away from your husband or from God, or becoming kind of a power unto yourself when you are solo parenting. But instead, you are cooperating with the Holy Spirit as he gives you more patience and more grace and more perseverance. Just like it talks about in Romans 5, verses 3-5. Not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings. And I know that solo parenting is not suffering per se, but sometimes it can feel overwhelming. And we could feel like we're being persecuted, or we can feel resentful of the person that's quote unquote put us in this situation. It can feel like suffering. And it goes on and says, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. In other words, it's not because we're big and bad and such tough mama jamas that we are solo parenting and pulling this thing off alone for a time, but instead because we've been called for this hard experience, or harder experience at least, to produce patience and character and hope and perseverance. And so when our husbands return, rather than saying, okay, listen, I've been running this ship and I've been just fine without you, and I don't need you, and I'm just going to keep running it because I found my groove and you're going to throw things off, we can say, what a gift to have you home, and lay aside that lay aside that kind of crown of self-sufficiency, because it's a false crown to begin with. We were doing this solo parenting thing by the Lord's strength anyway. And yay for daddy being home. Yay for husband being home. So practically speaking, I think it's a good idea to have kind of two mindsets that you can have. The daddy's home, and we're going to have this schedule, and we're going to take his schedule and his preferences into consideration, of course, because he's part of our family, just like we want him to take our preferences and our schedules into consideration. And we're going to function as a family unit with him in it. And then when he's gone, say, instead of, why isn't he here? And I'm bereft and I can't function, say, the Lord is going to help me to switch into this other mode, which says, I don't have to take those things into consideration this week, particularly because he's not physically home or he's gone on a shift or whatever. But I still need to keep in mind that we're a family. I still need to pray for him. I still need to be open to taking his calls and texting him back. And because I really think that depending on our personalities, we are capable of slipping into only business mode. And it's like, you're here doing your thing and I'm here doing my thing. And then it makes it even more jarring and more difficult to slide back into harmony together when we have been so focused on, quote, getting stuff done. And he's been so focused on his work that there's been very little communication or contact throughout the week. So that would be one suggestion. Two suggestions, really, kind of if you need to write it down or if you just need to think it through, kind of what are the things I need to change when I solo parent? And then how does that look different when my husband is home? And kind of say, Lord, help me to switch between the two well, without resentment. And then also, how can I be maintaining that connection with my husband and my children's father when he's gone, so it doesn't end up feeling like I'm the be all end all and he's just a nuisance when he shows back up. I can only imagine how much harder this transition is when you have longer periods of absence, like deployment. And circling back around to what those couple of readers that said, oh man, that's a really long time, 6 days. I really think that we become our own baseline. So whatever we become used to, if we've got a husband that regularly travels for 3 to 6 days or for 2 weeks or is deployed for 6 months, the Lord kind of helps us to flex that muscle and adjust our expectations. And that's a huge one. When we have expectations of certain treatment, of certain privileges, of certain responsibilities not being on our plate, and we don't ever adjust those expectations, but the circumstances get adjusted, oh my goodness, the resentment just grows. And I say this from personal experience because I can fall prey to that just as much as anybody. And Sean and I have had some conversations where we've had to hash it out, where I'm like, I'm really struggling with the way this looks because I feel like you have all of these freedoms, you have all of these abilities, I have all of these responsibilities and not very many freedoms. And sometimes there's some legitimate concerns there and they're worth talking through. And sometimes I just have to recognize that I'm not taking into account the fact that the Lord has given us roles and this role requires him to travel, and that's okay. And that's not any reflection on, if lately we're really into pickleball and lately he can go play pickleball in the evenings if he's not at work. And there can be part of me that says, oh, you're on a work trip. Well, I'm fine with your being gone as long as everything you're doing is only work. But that's placing an unnecessary and completely uncalled for expectation on him that the Lord didn't place on him. And also, man, we want people to be happy for us when we have good experiences. We want people to be happy for us when we have times of rest in the middle of our work. How much more so should we be willing to rejoice for others when they can have those good things, even if our load in that particular moment is hard? And I say how much more so, and you're probably like, oh, yeah, but how much more less? Because man, that's not where my brain and heart automatically go. And I can honestly say that that's not where mine go either, but I can acknowledge that it's not right when it goes to a place of comparison or envy or resentment. And so I'm preaching to myself, as always, just as much as I am giving suggestions to you guys or reminding you guys of truth. As far as how it's looked different as my kids have gotten older, I feel like when they were younger, I actually had, oddly enough, in some ways, more bandwidth than I have now to get things done. So one of the ways that I have made the time pass more quickly when Sean is gone, or at least made it feel like it's passed more quickly, is I would give myself projects to do while he's gone. And you're probably like, why in the world would you do that to yourself when you're solo parenting and already exhausted? And I will add, in addition to giving myself, I talk about this in the first part of this series, but giving myself a night to not cook and cooking simpler things and kind of simplifying and streamlining our schedule, I would put the kids to bed a little bit earlier or be very consistent with having them in bed, all of them in bed by 8, for example. I would work really hard toward that, because if I had given myself a goal, for example, of getting something wallpapered or getting something painted or doing some other project in our house or for myself, then I needed those evening hours available. So even though they weren't always in bed by 8 or 7:30 or whatever I was shooting for, I would kind of give myself the grace of saying, hey, you can take 30 minutes off their bedtime while your husband's gone and devote that toward wallpapering. I actually like looking forward to projects like that and feeling like I have, if not free time, a different configuration of time to get them done in. and have actually busted out quite a few projects. And I have heard from a lot of moms that say that this is kind of how their brain works too. So it may not be how your brain works. And you may be thinking, listen, I am barely keeping my nose above water by the end of the week. And I've had those weeks too. But a suggestion might be to give yourself something to look forward to, whether it's completing an art project that you've been working on or learning a new recipe or something like that, that makes the week feel special or something celebratory or productive, just anything that makes it feel less like this is all a downer because my husband is gone. And some of you may be thinking, listen, it doesn't bother me that my husband's gone. And that's totally fine. I'll be completely honest. At this point, it doesn't usually, quote unquote, bother me that much either because I am so accustomed to it. Do I like it? No. Would I prefer that he be home? Yes. But it's not dragging me down. However, I know there are a lot of people, because I have them in my DMs. It's the whole reason I'm doing this podcast, that really do struggle with this. So if that's not you, great. That tip's not for you. But if you do need something to look forward to, I encourage you to think that through as a way of preparing your heart and mind to enjoy that week and not just survive that week. As my kids have gotten older, I don't do the early bedtime thing anymore. So I'm much more likely to do a movie night with them if Sean is gone. We have, gotten the popcorn and the blankets and started a movie at 9:30 at night when Sean is gone. And honestly, that's just another way that I can look forward to the week, enjoy the week, find a way to connect with my kids that's a little bit different than usual. I might go play pickleball with Ezra if Sean is gone, or we might, do a picnic out in the yard. But obviously I have more help now. And so I don't have to think of it in terms of just it's all on me. Now, I'm still the parent. I'm still where the buck stops. I am still the guardian. I am still providing the meals and doing all the things. But it's nice to know that now that I have older kids that can drive, they can run kids to piano practice. They do regularly run kids to piano practice. They can take kids to soccer practice. And so I want to encourage you, as I do in a lot of areas, that feeling of everything resting on your shoulders and that feeling of kind of sinking in your stomach when you're like, whew, okay, gird my loins, we're going into a hard season or a hard week or a hard couple of days or a hard couple of weeks, that won't necessarily always feel the same level of heavy as your kids get older and become so much fun. I think my younger kids are so much fun to hang out with too. But as your older kids get to be wonderful conversationalists, as they are looking for ways to connect with you, my older girls, or my girls, they're all basically the same age, 11, and 13. They'll want to go after the babies are in bed and go to a little shopping area 10 minutes from our house and go get ice cream, or they'll want to do manicures together at home, or it's just a lot easier, I think, to find ways to look forward to that week when you have all of these rad kids that you have raised to be your best friends and people that you really enjoy to spend time with. Now, when they start getting older, then they start having social lives and they're gone and you don't see them as much, and you might be back to solo parenting again. But I just want to encourage you that all of that effort, all of that leaning in, all of that perspective shift and choosing to see the good and choosing to say the Holy Spirit is working endurance and perseverance and hope and patience and all these things in me through this hard time really does produce fruit. And as with every season, there will be aspects of it that are harder and easier, but they do tend, in terms of the particulars and the circumstances and the workload and all of that, to lighten a bit as your kids get older. And so really the only times that I feel like I am dreading Sean's work trips or when there's a lot of them in a row and we have a lot going on. So for example, I think I mentioned in the last episode that he was gone the week that we moved into this house, and then he was gone like 3 more times in 4 weeks or something like that. It's probably maybe too many, but it was pretty close. It was probably 3 or 4 times in 5 or 6 weeks. And just unpacking the house and reorienting ourselves and still homeschooling and all that felt like a lot. And I do know that those weeks I was holding it together till the end of the week. Most of the time, I did not necessarily feel like this was add a project on top of this, because there were built-in projects of unpacking and redoing the kitchen and trying to get everything back to normal. There are seasons, just like we were talking about just a second ago. Every season is going to have a different feel. Some are going to be harder than others. There are going to be seasons where I do find myself dreading or even resenting Sean's travel. But for the most part, after we'll be married 19 years in June. And then, like I said, he actually, when we were engaged, lived with us for a little while and traveled then as well. So not quite the same thing, but it'll be in the 20-ish year mark that I have been experiencing this. And the Lord has really grown my perspective on it. He has given me so many sweet times of fellowship with my kids that were different, because I was probably more intentional without Daddy home. And he's given me the opportunity to get stuff done and to invest. Not that I always did it well. There were definitely weeks that I, like I said, hung on by the skin of my teeth, especially those puking weeks. If you haven't listened to the first episode of this, go listen to that. And the sick weeks and the tired pregnant weeks and all of that. I'll close with this little story, which was so sweet. Probably one of my favorite memories of my entire life. I was pregnant with Honor, who is number 7. I was probably 32, 33 years old, something like that. And I had been doing a series of events for our business called Paint and Prose. And I had done maybe 3 or 4 kind of little bazaars or events that I'd gone to and taken physical things to, whatever our products were at the time. I don't think we even had shirts and hats or anything like that at the time. We do now, if you want to check them out. But I had taken boxes of things, hauled them into the building, set them up, broken them down, hauled them out, all the things. And I'd had to leave my kids with my mom and dad for more hours than I usually cared to, because it just so happened that all of these events ended up on the same week. And so I got done with my 3rd event, I think, and was just exhausted, like beyond worn out. I was 34 weeks pregnant and had been taking care of little kids by myself. And all of my kids were pretty small at that point still. Taking care of little kids by myself, and then having this extra business kind of stress on top of it. And man, just exhausted is the main word that comes to mind. And so I was at this last event, in the last hour of the last event, and just barely making it through. Like, there's this picture, which I'll talk about in just a second, but barely making it through. Plastic smile plastered on my face, just counting the seconds. But of course, the seconds were counting down to when I could break down the booth and then go pick up my kids and solo parent some more, because Sean was not supposed to be home until the next day. And as I'm talking to somebody about something they want to buy and smiling and nodding, I hear this voice. That's my favorite voice in the whole wide world behind me. And, you know, it just for a moment, I really felt like I was dreaming. You know, it was like, there's no way he's here. He was actually in Canada at the time. So there really was no way he was there. And I turn around and Sean's standing there in front of me. And I just, that is, my husband gives the best hugs of anybody I know, which for me, obviously. And that is probably one of the best hugs I've ever experienced in my entire life. Just the amount of relief that flooded my body, the amount of just joy at seeing him unexpectedly. It was just so good. It was just one of those euphoric moments you just never forget. And I just beamed my face off the rest of the night. Now, the good part was that he had not told me he had managed to get on an early flight and was going to surprise me, but he had told my best friend who was helping me with the booth. So she broke down the booth, and my mom kept the kids that night, and we just got to go have dinner and talk. And so I will say that I am grateful for trips, for the reunions that happen as a result of them. It's just so fun to get back with your best friend and person that you love after not seeing them for a while, especially in a circumstance like that. So hopefully that gives you another perspective on the ways you can look at your husband's not being home and you're needing to solo parenting as something that could lead to good, both in your growth and development and maturity as a wife and mom, and a Christian. I should say that first, as a Christian first, but also potentially in your marriage and in your parenting. A whole lot. I'm not into manifesting like the world thinks of it. Like I'm going to manifest, that this is going to be successful, or that I'm going to be good at this, or I'm going to feel good about this. But a whole lot of our outcomes correlate directly to our mindsets upon entering them. And we are to have the mind of Christ. And the mind of Christ is that we're not supposed to worry about tomorrow. We aren't supposed to be in dread of things that are hard. We are supposed to understand that we will experience struggle in this world to be of good cheer because the Lord has overcome this world. And so that includes these times when we're solo parenting, when things are not necessarily ideal, but the Lord can still work in that situation and through us for our good and his glory. So I want to encourage you that if that is your life circumstance, or that if you know someone whose life circumstance that it is, and you don't really get it, but you're looking for ways to uplift them and support them practically and emotionally and spiritually and all of those things, maybe this episode is enlightening to you and you can share it with others. And I appreciate you guys coming along for the ride for me with this. We will actually have a couple more episodes with interviews, and then I'll be taking a break for the summer. Partially because, or primarily I should say, because my son, Ezra, who is my editor and publisher for this podcast, is working at a Christian camp this summer and will not be available to do that. And partially because I have a book deadline on August 1st, and it would probably be a good idea to turn that manuscript in on time. And I think that both having that bandwidth to finish those things and for Ezra to work and for me to have a bit of a break this summer would be a good idea. So we'll have several more episodes, and then we will have a hiatus, and then I'll be back in August or September, and I'll give you more updates when I have that. But I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope you have a great day. If you enjoy the MS for Mama podcast, I would be so honored if you would subscribe and follow along, maybe share with friends, or even leave a review. And if you want more content on motherhood and biblical responses to cultural issues, be sure to follow along on Instagram at m.is.for.mama.